Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda. And good morning, everybody.
Hello, David, and welcome. We have a very special guest, as all our guests are very special, but this is a really very special guest. Kyle Jones, and I'm going to just say a little bit about Kyle, and then we're going to ask you to say hi to Kyle. Kyle Jones, PhD, is a clinical psychologist. Are you a postdoctoral fellow?
Yeah, that's technically my title.
Okay, postdoctoral fellow affiliated with the Feeling Good Institute in Mountain View, California, where he provides individual psychotherapy in a private practice. He co-leads a monthly consultation group with Maggie Holtom, also PhD, where therapists can get help with exposure methods for anxiety regarding their clients, or probably themselves. He has recently become an adjunct professor of psychology at Palo Alto University, where he teaches clinical interviewing in the clinical psych PhD program. So, yay, Kyle.
Thank you. That's a very flattering intro. I did write it myself, but
which is what makes it so easy.
I know. I'm glad to be back on the podcast here. It's been a little while.
Yeah. Today we're talking about how to mend a broken heart, and we're answering 20 questions about romantic rejection.
Yeah.
Kyle, tell us how you got this idea.
So I have to give a big shout out to one of my patients who's allowed me to acknowledge them. Chloe, a wonderful patient of mine, had most of these questions about dealing with a breakup and getting kind of rejected romantically. And we were, looking on the podcast, and she mentioned, oh, hey, I don't think there's a podcast exactly dedicated to this topic. And, David and Rhonda were super willing and excited to talk about breakups and getting rejected and how to mend a broken heart. So I'm glad to be here. And big thanks to Chloe and the others who contributed to some of the questions we'll be answering today.
And I'm so glad that you brought this topic, which is always one of my favorites when I was in clinical practice, both because of my own personal hurdles and learning to stop being such a nerd. And then I really loved, that's why I wrote Intimate Connections. And then I really, 60% of my patients were single. And they had a relationship and then got divorced or broke up and couldn't get back into the dating scene, or never got into it in the first place. And so I really, really loved working with patients with that issue, as you know, Kyle, and I can imagine it's probably one of your favorite clinical topics too.
Oh yeah, you've taken the words right out of my mouth. I love helping folks with I think relationship problems in general, but dating and dealing with a breakup and how to get back out there. I know I've benefited personally from working with David on this topic, and I've done a lot of personal work over the years, and it's really exciting and fun to help someone feel better after they've gotten dumped, and then help them get back out there and date, or if they have had trouble dating in the first place, helping them, play the game and make connections and get on dates and have fun out there in a respectful and fun way that's not kind of laborious or too anxiety provoking. I think dating should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a fantastic adventure. It's a phase of life. And I've always felt if you learn how to do it, you can kind of sow your wild oats and get it out of your system, and makes it easier to settle down later on if you've mastered the dating game. Whereas if you haven't, then you keep thinking you're missing out on something. You may be more prone to having affairs and, being unhappy with the person that you finally settle down with. One other quick thing I wanted to say, and then maybe Rhonda has some endorsements, hopefully, about me to read. But I want to say at the top that there's at least two main dimensions to dating, and almost none of the people who I treated understood this or accepted it at first. And there's the game playing aspect of the dating game, and that's what most of my patients fiercely objected to at first. They thought they could be their serious self and have people chase them, and and it never happens. And then there's the more vulnerable, deeper level, like with the 5 secrets of effective communication, where you're opening up and talking with people on a really deep emotional level and feeling close. And the biggest error people were making was trying to skip that game playing phase and get into the deep relationship, find someone they're attracted to and glom onto that person, put all their eggs in one basket, chase, and then get rejected. And I think in Feeling Good, or one of my books, maybe Intimate Connections, I likened it to that they didn't want to play the game of, dressing in cool clothes. You guys were commenting on my badass glasses that I got from Miriam Makowski and her husband Alex to protect from the glare of the screen I'm in front of all day long. But they look really cool, and it reminded me of when I was young and learning about this stuff. And it was really I made every mistake in the book, but it was as I solved those problems, man, life just became fantastic. And we hope we can bring that to a lot of our listeners today. And I might say we're going to focus primarily on the romantic type of rejection. But what we say and what you'll learn in these next 2 podcasts on this topic is that rejection is a part of the universe. It's not just human romantic relationships. It's a business issue. Because if you chase in business, you get rejected. It's the same thing, and it's for job interviews, for college interviews. If you try to impress other people and put your self-esteem and impressing others, and I need this person's approval, you'll just fail a lot. You'll get a lot of rejections, and once you let go of that and learn how to focus on others, and flirt a little bit, and let them learn how to make people chase you, because it's been dominant in my life as well. And often people will send me an email. I'm already talking too much. Shut up, David. I will. But often people will send me an email and say, "Oh, you should get together with this famous person. You'd really have a lot in common." And I've never once followed up on lame suggestions like that, because when you send an email to some famous person, say, "Oh, I'm famous too, and we're supposed to get together," you get 100% zero responses. And so even in my career, I've learned to let the universe chase me rather than me chasing the universe. And it has just transformed my clinical practice, my career, as well as my personal life.
Nice.
Yeah, very powerful.
Yeah. I do have a couple of endorsements, so let me jump and read those. and then we can get into the heart of this podcast. So these are regarding our episode 319, which we published on November 21st, November 21 of 2022. And that was an Ask David episode that David titled, Can Hypnosis Be Used for Evil? Can You Fall Out of Love? And Why Does Cheerleading Fail? And we've got quite a few endorsements, emails from this. Bettina wrote us, as always, a fantastic podcast. I look forward to Monday mornings when I can hear the next podcast. It's like a little gift every week. Thank you, David, Rhonda, and Matt.
Thank you, Bettina. That's so heartwarming.
And then Thomas wrote us, Hi, David. Thank you for everything you do to equip fellow therapists with the skills you've learned and experienced along the way. I consider myself blessed to have participated in the many workshops you presented at the Evolution of Psychotherapy conferences I attended over the last 10 years. You're a gift to humanity, and I thank God for you.
Well, thank you so much. What's this person's name?
Thomas.
Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. It's so kind of you.
Yeah. Well, those were about you, so good.
Yeah. And accurate, too.
Don't you get any hate mail on this podcast?
We do.
Actually do, yeah.
Especially when David swears, which we're not allowing anymore.
Yeah, no swearing, I get.
And that's a hell of a good decision, too.
Well, how shall we do this? Shall we read the questions that Kyle's client posed to us? Okay. So here's the first one. Why do you think it's so hard for us humans to handle rejection? Why do you think we're so afraid of it?
Okay. I'll let you folks take first shot at it.
Well,
Okay.
I can jump in.
Okay, go.
I was thinking about this. I know David and Rhonda have some ideas, but, we don't get a lot of kind of messages in our culture and society that like, oh, you can handle rejection and it's just fine and no big deal. You're going to make it. You're going to be okay. I think we're kind of conditioned to, with the media we consume and, stories we hear in life, aside from the ones on this podcast, the like rejection is bad. You need to sort of suffer at the end of it. And, and that it's going to be really hard. And I also think that, when we're dating and you're kind of deeply in love with someone, you're kind of thinking about, just like David was saying at the top here, about emotional intimacy, and how you're going to maybe spend the rest of your life with this person, and how, you kind of have this fantasy about how it's going to go. And you might have just started out dating. It's maybe a fresh relationship or something. I think in that case, if you get rejected and you get dumped, it's like, you don't only lose the, person that you're dating and having a good time with and having fun with, but you kind of also lose this, future that you maybe thought of or
You hoped
considered or hoped for, and it all kind of comes crashing down. And I think that's just really devastating for folks, and then also, people have kind of certain beliefs about rejection and how you can't kind of tolerate it or handle it. And I think David will talk more about that now.
Well, let me jump in first too, and then give David the last word.
Sure.
It's that, rejection hurts. And exactly from what you were talking about, Kyle, just piggybacking on that our brain is wired to experience pain when we're rejected. And I did a little looking in some old books that I have that talked about evolutionary psychology. And evolutionary psychologists believe that when we were hunter-gatherers and we lived in clans, we couldn't survive alone, right? And if we were being ostracized from our clan, it was basically a death sentence. So as a result, we kind of developed this early warning system to alert us when we were at risk of being rejected by our clan, and so by our clanmates. So if we adapted to the norm and changed our behavior to remain in the clan, then it was more likely that we would survive and pass on our genes. So avoiding rejection is a way of maintaining
survival,
right? Exactly.
Well, that's a cool one. Thank you for both of you. And then my small addition would be that the one of the ideas of cognitive therapy is that our suffering only comes from our thoughts and beliefs, not from what really happens. And so the idea is that rejection, it's impossible for rejection ever to upset a human being. It's physiologically impossible, because the only thing that could ever upset you is your own thoughts. But it's our thoughts about rejection, which are upsetting, and those thoughts will also always be distorted. You're telling yourself something that isn't true. And in addition, certain self-defeating beliefs trigger the pain of rejection, namely, and this is controversial, but the one I call, and others have called it too, Karen Horney, Albert Ellis, Aaron Beck, a lot of prominent mental health professionals. The love addiction is the idea, I can't be happy when I'm alone. I need love to feel happy and fulfilled. And of course, the idea of cognitive therapy is those are not true beliefs. You're telling yourself something that isn't true. And getting over that fear of being alone and that belief that you need other people is really one of the important keys to dating and to overcoming the fear of rejection. And when you're no longer afraid of rejection, you won't get so much rejection. And when you do, it won't upset you. It won't faze you in the same way. You can have a healthy sadness or disappointment when you're rejected, but a lot of people become actually suicidal and feel like without love or without this person's love, it's impossible for me to have a fulfilling and happy life, and nothing could be further from the truth. You don't need that person who rejected you. Good riddance. You need someone who will love you, and you don't even need them. You want them, and you can get them if you get over this erroneous belief that you need love in order to feel happy and fulfilled. But these beliefs are so intensely ingrained in us, as you pointed out, Rhonda, maybe even at a genetic level, and everyone just thinks it's so obvious that you have to be loved to be fulfilled. And if you don't, you're defective, there's something wrong with you, you're a pariah, you're less than. It's that type of thinking and not the actual rejection that upsets you.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and when I've been dumped and heartbroken, and I was trying to think, well, what, hasn't happened in a while, thank goodness, because I challenged these thoughts. No, but some of my thoughts were pretty bad. As I look back, I would tell myself, oh, this must be what dying feels like. I can't handle this. This is impossible. I'm not. How am I going to go on? I need to get back in this relationship. Of course I felt bad. That's all of this is going through my mind.
Yep. Well stated.
That sounds so painful, Kyle. This must be what dying feels like.
I know. It's just so funny. I just put that together as we were coming up with this podcast, even looking at this question. I would just wander around after a breakup, heartbroken, and be like, "Oh, I'm dying. This is what dying's like." And of course, I felt I was going to curse. I felt very bad, and and depressed and down.
I'm really glad you challenged those thoughts.
Yeah, I remember one time being in the car, and like practicing externalization of voices, kind of just with myself, in kind of a, like I'm hearing voices type of way, and like banging on the steering wheel, being like, "No, I don't need this other person. They are irrelevant. I am blah blah blah." And I felt much better afterwards.
Good. Well, actually, that kind of leads into the second question. Are we capable of overcoming the fear of rejection? And how do we accomplish that?
I'll let you folks take first shot at it again.
The first thought that came to mind for me with this question was, I think, well, this is a blanket statement. Of course, we can overcome the fear of rejection, but part of me was like, wouldn't it be I don't know, just a little silly to be totally unafraid of rejection. Wouldn't you want to be at least a little bit concerned or worried or, nervous about being rejected, holding on to some degree of anxiety or fear so that it kind of keeps you on your toes or keeps you on your A game. And then sort of paradoxically, if you're willing to sort of welcome the possibility that you could get rejected, I don't think it would bother you so much, but ultimately, yes, I do think you can kind of overcome the fear of rejection and you would, accomplish that. I guess with cognitive methods, like we've talked about on the podcast before, challenging your negative thoughts and beliefs about, being rejected. And then I think you actually kind of do need, well, David has some thoughts on this, I know, but you might need to do some exposure. You might need to sort of face your fear a little bit and realize that you can handle it and you can tolerate it. And it's not the end of the world.
Right, exactly. I'd also want to ask, is facing the fear of rejection is also a fear of being alone. And I was thinking that when you mentioned cognitive techniques, Kyle, of, we don't just throw techniques at people, but one technique that a person could try would be the what if technique to uncover more about those fears. And then, like you mentioned, facing them with a rejection practice. And, for our listeners who aren't 100% fluent, the what if technique is that you ask yourself to imagine what if that was true, that you could never overcome the fear of rejection. What would be the worst thing that could happen? And then write a little arrow under that, and then ask. And when you uncover that, just keep asking yourself that question until you imagine you get to the end. And
would you start with the thought, I might get rejected, or I'll never overcome the fear of rejection?
I would start with, I'll never overcome the fear of rejection. But what do you think, Kyle?
I think both could have good bear fruit, so to speak.
Yeah.
Doing a what if technique. Yeah. What if naturally,
if I never overcome the fear of rejection and I've been rejected, then I'll be afraid forever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then where do you go from there, Rhonda?
Then if I'm afraid forever, I'll be alone forever.
Mm-hmm. And then?
Well, let's imagine that was true, that you were alone forever. What would be the worst thing that would happen? Well, if I was alone forever, I would be really sad. I might not be able to have children. I might not fulfill my life's dreams in terms of being in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. And then I don't see where this is going to land exactly.
Well, we're going to uncover a self-defeating belief about the fear of being alone.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And I think when we get to we could put all of these thoughts in a mood log and work on other techniques to challenge them. That this is just an uncovering technique to uncover all the thoughts that we're having about the fear of being rejected.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. The first part of my book, Intimate Connections, is on overcoming the fear of being alone. It's all about dating. It's kind of my most superficial book. And I had to tone it down tremendously when I wrote it, because my editor, Maria Guarnaschelli, the late Maria, she was the editor of Feeling Good and my first few books, she said, if you publish this, it'll ruin your career, because it was all about the wild phase I went through when I finally overcame my nerdy phase. And I met this fellow in Palo Alto, because I was just rejected all the time, because I was a minister's son. I was taught to be serious. I was said, girls, I apologize for that word, but girls like sincere fellows. And I kind of discovered that wasn't actually true. And then I met this fellow who I called Bill in the book to disguise his identity, because I couldn't get a hold of him. I lost track of him to get permission. But he was, I mean, man, he he was dating people all day, every day, pretty much. and and oddly, he lived with his mother. He said, "I'm a mama's boy." And his real name was Michael, and he had a motor scooter, and he worked at Bloomingdale's department store at the Stanford Shopping Center, selling men's clothing, and he always looked like a total stud. And I would hear, I would be on. I remember once I was on University Avenue, and I heard two very attractive young ladies talking about him in a disparaging way, saying, "I wouldn't go within 10 feet of that guy. All he cares about is sex." The other woman said, "Yeah, he's repulsive. He's horrible." And then he happened to walk up and he put his hands around one of them and off they went. And he was like a sex magnet or something like that. And so oddly, he took me under his wing. And, I just started cutting medical school classes because I hated them anyway. And we went around and he kind of taught me the ropes. And it was just a fantastic experience. It was unbelievable. It was one of the most mind-blowing experiences of my life, and I learned so much about human behavior. And it was that experience on the street, nothing I ever learned in my residency or in medical school, that really gave me the skills I needed later on to teach people who were alone and lonely and getting rejected all the time. But I always say it starts out with overcoming your fear of being alone, because if you haven't done that, if you think you need other people, then you'll be very needy in the dating game. And you'll be, and I have something I call the Burns rule, which is people only want what they can't get, and they never want what they can get. And this is true even at the molecular level of protons and neutrons and positrons and all of that, and electrons. And so if you are afraid of being alone, you're what people can get, and this is going to put you in a needy position, and this will force people to reject you. And once you get over that, and you realize you can be happy when you're alone, as something which people fear. They don't want that discovery. They think, "Oh man, that's horrible. I don't want to be someone who isn't afraid of rejection." But when you are no longer afraid of rejection, then you can take chances, you can be goofy, you can be yourself, you can interact with lots of people in joyous ways, and then people will be attracted to you. And you won't be chasing. People will have to chase you, and that's the big transition, and that's the game playing phase of dating. And then once you're dating a lot of people, and you find somebody who you're more serious about, and they seem serious about you, you can gradually phase from the game playing phase of dating into the intimacy, the vulnerability, the deeper phase. But if you try to jump right into that deep relationship with the first person you get a date with because you're so needy, and you start fantasizing that they're going to make your life so wonderful, you get dumped really, really fast. I've said this once before, but before I met Michael and learned his devious but highly effective, ways of dating. I mean, he was like an Albert Einstein of dating. But before I made that connection with Michael, I remember I was and I was getting rejected all the time, and I was on the Stanford campus. I was outside the student union, which is nowhere near the medical school, and this hippie-looking fellow walked up to me, and I had no idea what he was, but he had a beard and long hair, and he says, "You know what your problem is?" And I says, "No, I would love to know what's my problem." And he says, "Well, you're always trying to reach out and grab the universe, and that's why you're unhappy, and you have to learn to let go." and then the universe will start trying to grab you and chase you. And then he walked off. I never saw him again. I have no idea how that happened, but it sure turned out to be true.
Yeah, look at that.
I love that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the next question. Wait, here's the next question. When it comes to getting dumped, do you guys believe there's a good way to approach it communication-wise?
Well, first shot to Rhonda and Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess, you know, communication-wise makes me think of like in the moment or afterwards. Personally, I like to take the stance of not really communicating with someone after they've dumped me, or if the relationship ends. I know it's tempting, super tempting, and there's lots of work to be done around that, which is one of my favorite things to help people with, to keep talking to the other person, and it's almost like a form of neediness or clinginess, like David was just talking about, right? Going, trying to stay in touch, trying to stay in contact. You've just been dumped, and maybe you're trying to sort of claw your way back into the relationship with that person, and of course they don't want to. Or maybe the other person has dumped you and they're still wanting to talk, right? Because they don't want to actually have a emotionally intimate relationship with you, but they just kind of want to be able to date and play the game and kind of keep you around. But yeah, I actually take the stance of trying to resist the urge to reach out or text or talk to the other person after you've been dumped. I guess maybe that's the answer to the question. I don't know if I'm answering the right one, but that would be my thoughts. Rhonda, what do you think?
Well, I kind of want to know, why do you want to know whether you were dumped, and do you trust the other person's going to be honest with you? And how will it feel? Just like, I don't know. I'm kind of in the cut off the ties, just like make a clean break school. But if you really want to know, you might want to do a cost benefit analysis to decide whether or not you even want to ask them why you were dumped. Like, won't what they say also be distorted, or won't that come into your, your distorted thoughts about what happened? And sometimes I think people have an intuitive, don't you think that you have an intuitive understanding of why you were dumped after it happened?
I think sometimes. I think sometimes people do, but other times it can be, someone's wrapped up in their own negative thoughts, thinking they're dying or something. They can't really see with any clarity what's going on. But I guess it just depends. What do you think, David? Is there a good way to approach it with communication?
I think there is, and I agree with what both of you were saying. Absolutely, I wasn't the best father, I don't think, and had a lot of failures, and not being nurturing enough, I think. But in the one area that, like with my daughter, where we really, really got close was in, I conveying what I learned from Michael to her. Like, I remember once sitting with Michael in the student union, and people are going to say I'm sexist and whatever, and I guess I probably am. I think all human beings are kind of sexual, to be honest with you, but
well, sexual and sexist are two different things.
Yeah. Sure. But at any rate, I saw these two just gorgeous women sitting in a booth, having lunch or something. And I said, that one there on the right, see if you can go and just talk to her and pick her up, type of thing. Like, like have her come over and, go out on what you might call a date or something. And he said, oh yeah, I'll be happy to. I mean, he was totally fearless. So he went over and chatted with her for a moment, and she shot him down really bad. which was very unusual. And then he came back, and I said, well, what do you do when you get shot down? Like when you get rejected, how do you handle that? He said, oh, I'll show you what you do. And then he went up and talked to the other one that was having lunch and picked her up, and they went off to the woods and did whatever, you know. And that was really dramatic. And so when my daughter went into high school, we weren't very wealthy, but we were living in a very wealthy area, and we didn't necessarily fit in. You know, we're kind of like California hippies or something like that, living in the Gladwin, Pennsylvania, and so my daughter felt very, you know, unpopular and depressed and, you know, kind of discouraged, and I kept telling her, you know, Senia, dating is a skill you can pick up, and I can teach you, and you know, popularity is just a behavior, just learned behaviors. And she said, oh, Dad, you're such a ass, you don't know what you're talking about, that's so stupid. And I think she thought like you were born, and if you had a P on your forehead, like for popular, then you were one of the popular people, and if not, you were one of the losers. And that was her mindset. And my wife finally says, no, you know, your dad knows a few things really well, and this is one of them, and you should pay attention to him. And finally, she gave in, and then I started teaching her about flirting and really how to manipulate boys, and also how to dress. And we would go out to the Bloomingdale's, King of Prussia, or little boutiques, and you know, women's clothing is something I understand really well. I learned it from my mother, because she worked selling women's clothing, and she had a good flair for it. And I was just always interested in it, and so I started showing her how to dress like really dynamite, and how to flirt with boys, and how not to take boys seriously. And sure enough, within a couple of weeks, one of the cutest boys, his name was Ian, a sophomore, started dating her, but she told me he has problems with girls. I shouldn't use that word, but I'm trying to be true to the language of the time with high school kids. And he has problems with his mother, and he manipulates girls and stuff. And what should I do? And I said, well, I'll tell you what to do. And because I said, because what he'll try to do is, you know, he'll break dates at the last minute. And you know, he'll not show up for a date, and then
he'll leave you hanging. Yeah,
he'll leave you hanging, and then one day he'll call you up and tell you he just wants to friend you. That's his ultimate way of, you know, killing you know, a girl who's interested in him. It's kind of a power thing, and I'll show you exactly what to do when that happens. And we practiced, and then one day I was in my office, and she came in, and there was a phone call, and she picked it up, and I could hear she was talking to Ian, the blue-eyed, beautiful boy that everyone thought was answer to every girl's dreams. And he started, you know, doing the friend thing. You know, Senia, I just want to be friends. I need to date other girls, you know, this type of thing. And she said, okay, hold on. She put her hand over the phone. She said, Dad, it's happening. Should I sock it to him? And I winked and said, go for it. The poor guy. And so she took put the phone back to her ear and said, oh, Ian, I'm so happy to hear you say that. And there was a pause. He says, what? And then she says, yeah, because I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but you know, I've been wanting to date other guys too, and don't get me wrong, I think you're really nice, and you can call me anytime you want just to talk as friends. And he looked like a wounded lion or something, and he said, well, okay, if that's the way you feel. And then she said, okay, she hung up and said, okay, now what do I do? I said, well, now find some boy who's older than Ian because he'll have more status and flirt with him. And the moment he dates you, you'll have Ian will be your slave for life. And she said, okay. And a few days later, she brought a note from this guy, Dave, who was a senior, and he had a band that actually played in nightclubs. So he was a very heavy hitter. And it said, Senior, I think I love you. Please call me. Here's my phone number. She said, what should I do now? I said, well, now, call him, go out on a date with him, and then watch what happens to poor Ian. So she did that. And poor Ian called her every Sunday for 2 years begging for a date. So that's how you talk to somebody who dumps you.
Mm.
That's the answer to the question. But again, you see, it depends on not thinking I need this person's love to be happy and fulfilled, and to love yourself and to see yourself as the beautiful one, as the special one. And once you have that attitude, you become infectious in the dating arena. And I think you've had that your experience yourself, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I think so. It's so funny that the story you were telling kind of reminded me of when I first started dating my current, partner of 5 years now, Chris. And, right towards the beginning of that relationship, and I was sort of playing the game and doing my best. And right about maybe a couple of weeks went by, maybe a month or so. And then I started hearing from an ex who dumped me. And they wanted to talk and wanted to come back. And it was kind of like the universe just sending the person back as soon as I didn't want them or need them anymore. And I was sort of happy and content with myself and, really just didn't require getting love from other people to feel good. And it's like they all came out of the woodwork trying to chase me. It was great.
Yeah, it's an amazing phenomenon.
It was like I had to pull over when I got the phone call as I was driving. I remember I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah. Yeah, and you see it even with animals. It's exactly the same, like cats. I hated cats for years because I would chase after them and try to pet them like a dog, and they would just run away.
Yeah.
Dogs are much easier, by the way. They're gullible; they'll go for anything. But cats are very, very difficult. And then my wife taught me the way you do with a cat, you make them come to you, and you never chase them. And it is so true. Sometimes we have this little cat that we adopted who was her owner died, and she was 8, and we took her and then loved her. But she loves Melanie more than me. And you say, well, David, why are you talking about cats? What does this have to do with dating? Well, the answer is everything. And the other day I was watching TV and I fell asleep and I was sitting with my legs out on the couch. And when I woke up, she was on my lap purring. Mm-hmm. But if I tried to pick her up and put her on my lap, she would just freak out and run away.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's the same in dating. The moment people sense that you're tense and anxious and grabbing at them, they'll vanish. Yeah. But if you do as Senior did, pull back and let them know you're not interested and you don't want them, and genuinely you don't. Why would you want a boyfriend like Ian? Now, he probably overcame it, hopefully, and became a good husband eventually. It's animal magnetism type of thing. It happens instantly, and it happens at all levels in the universe. It happens with animals. It happens with humans. It happens with matter, atoms, particles, nanoparticles.
All right, let's move on to the next one. We've got so many questions here. We could just talk forever. This is great.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the next one, Rhonda?
So the next one is, if we're caught off guard with the breakup and we don't see it coming, and all of a sudden one day our partner decides to end the relationship, how do we not let our emotions get the best of us in that moment, in that very moment?
Well, first dibs go to Rhonda and Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel kind of sad even imagining this. It sounds like, you're describing getting kind of blindsided. You think everything's going well. There aren't any cues you've picked up on, but the relationship's going poorly. Maybe you think you're kind of in this emotionally intimate phase and everything's going okay. And then kind of out of the blue, this happens to you. I mean, I guess that could happen. And I just think it's really kind of shocking. You're allowed to be sort of shocked, and maybe you feel overwhelmed or sad or panicky or something. Yeah. I mean, I think, of course, if you want to try and anticipate how to handle that moment, you could, but gosh, it just sounds, I go wanting to curse again. It sounds bad. It just sounds kind of devastating, and maybe you're sad and heartbroken and feeling, overwhelmed and devastated. I don't know if there really is a need to sort of have the perfect response in that moment. And those are my initial thoughts. Rhonda, what do you think?
Well, this is exactly why what I said before about you have an intuition about why you were dumped was absolutely wrong. Because like you said, being blindsided when you think that the relationship is going great or you're happy, it's like you said, Kyle, it's just perfectly reasonable to feel sad or to cry or to be shocked or feel angry. The thing in that question, that the phase that gets to me is when the questioner asks, get the best of us. And, it's okay to have those feelings. I mean, it seems appropriate. That seems like an appropriate response. It's okay to have the feelings. You don't have to respond with a perfect 5 secrets response or say the perfect thing to your ex. This might be just the time that you need to take a break and do your own healing and breathe, calm down, take a walk.
You could always respond with the 6th secret.
Yes, the 6th secret, which we won't say on the podcast, but you can imagine what it is.
David will say. How do you respond when you've just gotten dumped and you're blindsided in the moment?
Well, I'm on the same page with you folks. I think when negative things happen, it's totally appropriate to have negative feelings. Why shouldn't you have negative feelings? But if they become, very powerful and overwhelming to you, then again, you're probably haven't gotten over this fear of rejection and this fear of being alone and this need for love. And a lot of my ideas are pretty far out there, and sometimes I don't even share them because they're so far out. But another thing that I noticed when I was in my dating phase was that sometimes I'd get. I would go through kind of a needy phase where 100% of women would reject me. And then I'd kind of get into this enlightened phase, and all of a sudden they would be pursuing me. And I often had the experience when I was in that needy phase and some particular person had rejected me. And then maybe weeks later, I'm where the action is, ladies.
Yeah.
And that very same person then started chasing me. It's that same push-pull dynamic. And so it doesn't hurt to take out a daily mood log and write down your negative thoughts and identify the distortions in them and see what you're telling yourself. But again, I think that there's something I call relationship tax. And if you want to have, great relationships with people, then the tax is to first use the techniques in the first part of my book intimate connection. Sounds like I'm promoting my book, Heavens to Betsy. How could I be doing that? Well, I am, because it can. I mean, it's dated now, and there's problems with it. And if I had time to redo the book now, I would. But there's still a lot of great truths in there, and if you overcome this fear of being alone, then you'll get over that understandable disappointment. What is the disappointment, the sadness show about? You shows you love people, you love relationships, and you don't need to be afraid of being upset or blown out of the water temporarily. When bad things happen in life, and it's totally appropriate to be upset.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. Well, we have time for just one more, so I'm going to just take the next one, and then we can come back to a second podcast. So when it comes to recovery after being broken up, how do you fight the urge to go back with your ex?
Well, Rhonda and Kyle have some amazing things to say on this.
I've actually thought about this a lot.
Oh gosh, I thought about this a lot too. I always feel so surprised, and sometimes my empathy skills fail me, when I'm working with folks, because you're talking about getting dumped and how devastated they are, but then there is kind of some history in the relationship, right? The person isn't treating you right, and they're they're not communicating with you. They're kind of blowing you off. They're not treating you very well, right? And then It's almost like you slip into this sort of like a delusion almost, about maybe the first kind of couple of dates or the first week you were together, and your mind is just totally consumed with this sort of rosy hue of how things were, and you just must get back to that, right? I think there's some element of, maybe this is identifying distortions, but like coming back to reality, here's this person who was kind of cruel to you and mean to you, and they dumped you, and they weren't very nice, and they didn't treat you very well, right? And that you've got just this incredible urge to like get back to them. I think that's definitely worth resisting, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe you do a little, talk back to tempting thoughts to go back to your ex, if that's your agenda, right? And do some of that work. That's fun.
Yes, I am on the same page as you, Kyle. Exactly. That to look at the thoughts that are leading you to want to get back with your ex, and what do those thoughts say about you that are really awesome? And then, if that's your agenda, like you said, examine them for cognitive distortions, or you could talk back to them with the double standard technique or externalization of voices. You could do a time projection where you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, and have a conversation with your future self to talk about what you want and what kind of person you want to be with and how you want to be treated in the future. I was married before I was married to Michael. And before we were married, that husband's used to have this picture on his desk of a woman that he dated before me. And she was posed naked. And I used to say, when I come over, you should take that picture off your desk. And he was like, oh, it's just art. It's you. There's something the matter with you that you don't accept this picture. But then when we got married, he did put the picture away. Okay. And then we separated, but we were still kind of dating because I wanted to get back to with him because he was really a fun guy, although that we had definitely had problems. And then when we started dating after we separated, that naked picture of his old girlfriend came back on the desk. And I did think of myself in the future. Do I want to be in a relationship with somebody who has a naked picture of another woman? And I said, no, I don't really want that. And so that was a good indication that I could end that relationship. But also you could practice distraction. Like and that's what you can practice, like when you start thinking about your ex, distract yourself with, concentrating intensely on things that give you joy, like music or art, other art besides naked pictures of your ex. Or friends or work or cooking or another hobby, but just like get into things that you enjoy that give you pleasure.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And another thing that came to mind is like, get back out there.
Yeah.
When you feel ready and when you feel comfortable, and maybe you've done you've read the first section of Intimate Connections and mastered those techniques. Get back out there and actually put yourself in the dating game again. And I think just like we've been saying, the other person will pick up on that and come crawling back to you as soon as you don't want them anymore and you're moved on to dating other people.
I'll add a couple things and then we'll break off of this part one. I think it's going to end up a 4-part series rather than a 2-part series. But I just love these topics so much, both from my professional career and my personal life. But there's a lot of techniques you can use. A lot of the addiction techniques that could help. That's kind of an addiction, chasing your ex, thinking about your ex, and you can use the decision-making form or just a cost-benefit analysis. What are the advantages and disadvantages of doing this? And of course, there's a lot of advantages. It kind of keeps the relationship alive. It keeps hope alive. You can indulge in all your fantasies, and you might decide that you want to do that, in which case I say, go for it. Is there anything else I can help you with? But you can use the devil's advocate technique. What are the tempting thoughts? How would you turn back how would you talk back to them? You can use visual imaging techniques. You'll probably be fantasizing about that person and how wonderful they are and your happiest moments. Well, think about your worst moments when you have that. Do thought substitution. Think about them having diarrhea or vomiting on the floor when they were drunk, or when they were hostile and mean and things like that. But one of the techniques that I love the most, as you've heard from this, is storytelling, because I think storytelling conveys something, a reality that the listener can suddenly hear and see something maybe they hadn't seen before. But I was living with this young lady, Judy, for a while in a house with some other people in Palo Alto, near University, or near El Camino, actually. And she was a pretty, let's say she was a very attractive young lady. And once there was this car that kept going past our house. And then one evening it kind of pointed at the house with the headlights on, and it just seemed so weird. And then one day the car parked, and these two guys walked up, and they're the kind of guys you kind of see at bars sometime, kind of handsome, sadistic looking guys. And real mean. And they said, we're here to see Judy, and it was one of her ex-boyfriends. And they walked right into the house, and I didn't know what to do. And I had a broken jaw at the time. I'd gotten someone threw a beer mug there was a fight in a place I was drinking beer in Palo Alto, and the thing hit me in the jaw, and it broke my jaw, and I had to rush to Stanford in my car, bleeding, and my teeth were loose, and I had to have surgery to have my jaw wired shut. And so I was feeling pretty vulnerable. So I picked up the phone and just dialed. The operator said, "Can send the police. We've got unwelcome visitors inside our house. Please send the police to this address." And so they left, and kind of growling, "We're going to get you."
That's scary.
That really creeped me out. And then Judy, started dumping on me and treating me real shabbily. You get in that I'm no good and the world's all against you. Yeah. And the whole universe conspires. But I had this friend who had been kind of mentoring me, who was a kind of a quasi underworld type of guy. He was a psychodrama marathon leader, and he was a very fiery individual. And so it was about 10 at night, And I couldn't sleep. I was in a panic. What should I do? So I finally called him. I said, Sergio, what should I do? Here's what happened. And he says, well, I'll tell you what to do. Tomorrow morning, call him, get his phone number from Judy and call him about 7 a.m. So it'll wake him up. And because I'm sure what happened is he went and got drunk,
Yeah, he'll be hungover.
Yeah, and so he'll be hung over. And then you tell him, listen, I think I did the wrong thing. And I think maybe you and Judy have something really important and maybe want to, start dating again. And so what I'm going to do is to tell him, this was Sergio's advice, tell him that you're going to leave the house for the entire day, and that he's free just to come over and hang out with her, and they may discover that they want to reactivate their relationship. And then he said, and the guy will have no interest at that point. And then he says, meanwhile, you get on your motorcycle, go and drive around in the woods, or find some hippies, find some other young lady, and get all excited about someone else. And then at the end of the day, you drive back. And he said, you'll be very surprised at what you find. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I called this guy the next morning. Now, this is the opposite of the chasing. This is the answer to the question. The urge to go back to the ex. You see, I went in the opposite direction. If you chase the universe, you'll get dumped on. If you let the universe chase you, you'll have some pleasant surprises. And so I called this guy and told him I was wrong. I apologize. He has every right to get together with her. And
you're not going to get in his way.
Yeah, I'm not going to get in his way. I won't even be there. I'm going to tell Judy you're probably going to come by, and that's fine. And so I called him, and he was kind of shocked. He sounded drunk and half, hungover, and kind of grumbled. And it was a short conversation. And then I told Judy, that I'd called him and invited him over. And
I'm sure she was happy about that.
Yeah. And then I got on my motorcycle, and I was driving around Alpine Road. I went out in the woods beyond there. And then I found this house with a bunch of hippies dancing around outside. And there was this really attractive girl in a hammock. And she said, do you want to get in the hammock with me? And I said, I sure do.
Sure.
When we started making out, and it was just fantastic. It was like being in heaven or something. I said, this is better than getting hassled by Judy, because, she had been treating me shabbily anyway, and she wouldn't, fix up the house, and she wouldn't cook or anything. And so then I drove back at the end of the day on my motorcycle. And the house was immaculate. She'd spent the entire day cleaning the house, and she prepared a beautiful dinner. And he hadn't come by, and she was just so, excited to see me and so forth. And so that's again the same message as the answer to all of these questions is if you chase, the universe will dump you, and if you believe in yourself. Then the universe will chase you. And it sounds pretty simplistic. And there's, of course, these things are sometimes easier said than done, but there's a tremendous wisdom in there. And for me, it was life transforming.
That's a fun story. But I think the bottom line of your story is that you had the confidence.
Yeah.
That something else would come along, and that something else did come along. That was like you joined the Helven realms.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story to end this podcast on.
Yeah.
And we have more to come next week. So thanks, Kyle.
Great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to see you and hang out, Kyle. And thank you for the beautiful job you did preparing all these questions that I hope are relevant to some of our listeners, as well as if you have children, probably relevant to your children as well.
Great. Yeah. Okay. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.